Welcome back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast, where we bring real game from real pros. I'm Ryan Mundy, sitting alongside Justin King, and we are your hosts. And this week, we're cutting through the noise about recruiting commitments. Everyone loves a great recruiting graphic, but remember, the celebration is just the beginning. And the harsh truth is that, once you commit, that's where the real evaluation starts to heat up. The coaches are still watching. Scholarships are not locked in. I said are not locked in, and only athletes who keep improving really kind of keep their spot. And so today we're going to break down what really happens after you commit, the mistakes that could cost you your scholarship and your dream, and the habits that really set athletes apart and ultimately secure their spot and keep them winning. So stick around if you want these tools, the clarity, the insights, because we're going to be dropping gems in this episode. But before we get into all that, how you feeling today, Justin?
Feeling good, man. It was just a trying time in the summer. A lot of negotiations going in. We talk about commitments, commitments, NIL, collective, revenue sharing, all that crazy stuff going on. And, now that companies are starting to understand the NIL space, I think they're a little bit more advantageous of getting into the high school marketing space. So I've been dealing with a lot of that this weekend, but it's been fun weekend.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, when you say companies, what type of companies?
You figure athletic companies, right? Like D1 Athletic, which is, the corporate partner from that standpoint. You have other one, you got trading card companies wanting to get involved. And then you get into the different ecosystems and colleges that can range everywhere. We start getting into that North Carolina base. You start talking about Fayetteville. You start talking about different companies that want to be associated with athletes and making sure there's creative and protective deals around guys that we deal with.
Yeah. We did an episode about the legislation that was passed a few weeks ago. I want to follow up real quick on that. Has that kind of accelerated some things? Because you mentioned companies are starting to really get into the space. Did that legislation really kind of, let's say, open the floodgates, if you will, for folks to really kind of start to get involved?
It's interesting. I don't know if it opened the floodgates, because when NIL opened, I think that's when all the pariahs or just, the leeches kind of came in. What the NCAA House settlement did was, I think, brought in a little bit more of a corporate presence, right? We talk about insurance companies trying to formulate what the employee structure look like for athletes moving forward. So from that standpoint, more consulting type of conversations in that space. And I think there's a legitimizing the NIL space when you talk about the NCAA bill coming over for people that don't really pay attention to much college sports. So we're I can get involved. We can pay players. And so maybe piquing their interest a little bit more. But even from that, it's still more, I'd say, grounded than it was 4 or 5 years ago when NIL just kind of busted on the scene.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I've been tracking the space. It seems like there's a lot of momentum, and summertime is a busy time for two reasons, right? The season is right around the corner. So you got to train, get your team and your roster ready, et cetera. But it's still a crucial period for evaluation and that next generation of athletes that's going to step on campus, with the camps and everything like that, man. So let's dive in though and really kind of talk about, when we do talk about recruiting, essentially it shows up as kind of two phases, if you will. Phase one is everything that happens before committing to the school. And I remember back when I was in high school, I had a whole bunch of offers and really just wanted to have an experience of what is it like at Michigan? What is it like at Notre Dame? What is it like at Penn State, et cetera? And really use it as kind of a fact-finding mission and journey when we talk about this kind of down period in time and going to camps and stuff like that. But eventually you do have to make a decision, right? And I made my decision to go to Michigan during my season, my senior year of high school back in 2002 in the fall. I made that decision, but I wanted to kind of keep it under wraps. I wanted to still take my official visits and all the other things like that. But it was still a very firm, verbal commitment on my official scholarship offer to the University of Michigan. And they were okay, you're signed up. I'm ready to roll. Let's do this type of thing. But it seems now that has changed, and it has changed quite a bit. And so with that first phase and all the things that are leading up to the commitment, what are some of the considerations, the things, the dynamics that you've been seeing that have been happening and really just kind of have evolved in the space since we've been in school?
Man, that's a great question. I think the pivoting point in all of recruiting was the non-committable offers. That started, around like probably 2007, 2008, where guys would get offers and they weren't necessarily real. And, like when we were coming up, when we got scholarship offers, they were typically like, they were real scholarship offers. And when they weren't available anymore, the coach would give you a heads up like, hey man, we got this guy, your time's ticking. What's going on? So what kind of happened, 2008, when I would say the commercialization of college sports, I think really began. They weren't dropping players. Places like Alabama, when Saban would come in, they would poach players. They would poach guys from other commitment lists right before signing day, get all the best players. So what would happen is, to try to combat that, teams would offer players early, do different things of that nature. And then depending on how the coaching staff handles it, they would drop guys before signing day and upgrade the roster. So it created this whole fiasco of fake offers, real offers, and then another phase of trying to figure out, if this offer real or not. Because the schools and the SEC were really trying to upgrade the roster at the last minute. So there became this jockeying of placing offers. That started a level of competitive advantage in the South because, up north, sometimes with the relationships, when you drop kids later in the process, it messes up, relationships that you got to go recruit to get the next kid and things of that nature. So that kind of started the whole committable offer situation when everybody tried to upgrade and churn their rosters at the college level.
Why did that happen though? Like, why did all of a sudden this non-committable offers show up on the scene?
So certain schools would start offering players very early, like Alabama or like Jim Harbaugh, to create that relation, right? Like, hey, I'm your first number that you get. I'm your first love or whatever the case may be. Like Penn State was my first offer going into 9th grade. I remember that. It's a very impressionable thing.
Get your first big offer.
First big offer. So a lot of schools started to sprint to try to become that first big offer. But in order to take advantage of being that first big offer, you also either have to have a super solid evaluation process to make sure that you don't have to drop that kid later, or you just don't have to care about dropping that kid later. What happens was a lot of assistant coaches as independent contractors, they're just trying to build relationships. So they would offer a lot of guys early and it's like, hey, if you don't develop, it's not committable. You know what I mean? So that's where that whole thing of a fake offer or provisional offer came about. Hey, we offer a guy, but you got to come to camp to claim it. So that means you got to come to camp and actually see you run. You know what I mean? Even if you have an offer. So that happened, I guess, when we started professionalizing the college sports rosters behind the veil, because we were trying to upgrade the rosters and we got to bump guys and do different things of that nature. And you wanted to make sure that you're getting a sports asset that is looking to still develop. Right. So when you start to offer players early, you don't see the full picture. So you're just actually making the evaluation process a little bit longer.
I was thinking about that because it is a longer process, right? Like, and in theory, you might want it to be a shorter process.
Boom.
In theory, it might be more advantageous for you to have fewer looks, fewer opportunities for evaluation, et cetera. That's kind of like the game within the game. You know what I mean?
Stay there, because this is the big argument amongst like the exposure scene in college or in high school, because everybody thinks that I need to be exposed to get the offers. I need to have great exposure. It's like, man, if your business or your product's not good, it just means you're going to get wiped off the list. So it's not really about exposure. It's about making sure that you're hitting the right points. And then when you're exposed to the right coaches, you're ready to cash out in a strategic way. So I think that is also a thing where guys putting themselves out there prematurely to be judged. And I mean, that's also birthed the industry of training for IG. You know what I mean? Because that comes into the marketing of, hey, I'm just trying to expose myself. And that all kind of gets bastardized or convoluted with NIL and these kids thinking that that's building their brand. Mm-hmm. So it gets really tricky on like, what is the actual evaluation process?
Total sidebar. I'm just generally curious, man. Like, cause I see it all up and down my Instagram feed. Like, the algorithm feeds me all these OT7s and the trainers and all the release moves. And I'm like, yo, I play DB, like show me some DB clips, but that's a whole nother thing. But like these kids online now, and even I thought it was funny, one of the local parents around here sent me Instagram that he has for his son, and his son is in like 7th grade. And he's sending me like clips from like 7-on-7 and kind of like practice. I'm like, honestly, bro, I don't even know what to do with this. You know what I'm saying? He's so young. but like you're pubbing him and promoting him, etc. But the question that I have is like, is there a sense of overexposure for a lot of these athletes? You know what I mean? Like, are they overexposed? Are they hyper promoted? And is that like convoluting or diluting the actual product that they're putting on the field, their skill development, etc.?
1000%.
They're burning them out. You know what I mean? All these sorts of things kind of show up, right?
Everything that you're describing is the commodification process, right? When like a person's turning into a product, and a lot of times parents and athletes think is just positioning themselves or watching OT7 or watching the NFL and watching the guys that are promoted or branded through there, not recognizing that it's like a dual lane brand and they're elite at their sport. Not to say that you can't have an X factor personality trait where people are just intrigued by you and your personal value proposition to the free market. That's one thing, but then positioning yourself as a sports asset and essentially giving false promises of what you are is set up for disaster. It might be like a quick dopamine hit where it's like, oh, I get likes, I got a nice edit, this, that, and the third, but that's a strong crash once you don't get any film or your huddle is 30 seconds long and it's the same play 18 different times, different angles, right? So, I mean, I know all the tricks, right? The sped up film and all these different things. But when you get to that, that's why I feel like the evaluation process and the commodification process for these athletes and families is extremely difficult and nuanced because they get rewarded for these different type of things as well. So it's hard to tell a family, hey, don't overexpose this kid at 7th or 8th grade, and then they get a scholarship offer in 8th grade going to 9th grade because someone sees them, they're sized up, and based on what the offer process is, the barrier of entry is extremely low nowadays. If you're within that that gene pool, whether it's height, weight, size, speed, and all those different types of things.
One more question or like talking point that I think would be interesting for our listeners about like phase one, this whole process is, and this phase one again is around like before the commitment, right? Like you got some interest, you got some, a little bit of traction, a little bit of buzz. What is the main thing or the main consideration that, assuming an athlete is on the path, right? Like they're doing their thing, etc. Still no commitment just yet, right? What's like the top consideration? And this might be an answer differently for both stakeholders, but I'll ask it like, what's the top consideration for the athlete? And what's the top consideration for the parent of the athlete, the advisor for the athlete, etc.? Could be the same thing, but just want to separate those two. And if it is the same thing, that's all good. But I'm generally curious on like, all right, things are going well. We're moving in the right direction. We haven't committed anywhere just yet. But what, from your experience, like what is the top question or the top concern that ultimately gets answered that brings clarity that then allows the athlete to say like, I feel good about committing here?
I think athletes figuring out a cutthroat criteria that they have and not letting the ecosystem or the schools determine what you care about. So when I say that, I think going in, it's extremely hard as a top level athlete. You're going to Michigan, have 100,000. Penn State got 110,000. You go to Tennessee, you go to these places and they're offering top education, top football, NFL draft picks. It becomes sensory overload and you kind of lose track of what matters to you. So my thing for athletes is really having a cutthroat criteria going into the process, like, and being honest about what it is that you want. I want to play early. I need to get developed. I need to play both sides. I need to live in this. I want to study that. I need this type of NIL support. I need my media rights. I need these type of things. And once you kind of shape out, we help athletes like shape out that avenue of development or that beneficial ecosystem that they have for where they're going, whatever school can provide that is kind of the clear winner. But I think preparing that, because every athlete is completely different. I've recruited athletes where they didn't want to go to a school if they weren't going to get redshirted because they felt like they still needed to be developed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for that athlete, there's no point in going somewhere or selling early playing time because like he's scared to play early. And this player that I'm speaking of ended up going first round. So it doesn't necessarily mean like the ending or the outcome success determined, but I think you have to be authentic in what you're setting yourself up for because you're still developing. Do you know what I mean? Throughout this process. And I'll give a shout out because one thing I'll just say, a lot of parents, as they're kids are teenagers and they're moving through this process, we like to push our kids out of like their comfort level. Like, hey, you need to grow in this. I know that you're uptight, but you need to go here and do this. I would say let them do that after they get out of college. Like this college situation, they need to stack the chips in their favor. Do you know what I mean? Like this isn't the time to push them necessarily outside of their comfort zone. We got to figure out where that comfort zone is, stretch it a little bit as we go through the recruiting process. But like when we get there, it needs to be set up for them to succeed. Because if not, it's tough.
Yeah, tough is an understatement. Tough is 1,000% an understatement. All right, bet. So, all right, we level set on that phase one. But then now we announced our commitment, right? Like, so now here we are, we've made a decision, all the boxes have been checked, etc. But in the blog post that was released last week, check out the Blue Chip Academy blog post on Substack, posted last week. The real evaluation just hit in phase two, right? And the word that you used was the silent second tryout. What does that mean? Like, what is all inclusive of the silent second tryout? Like, are the stakes higher now? Like, let's start out with just like a general overview of like what that all entails.
The stakes are definitely higher because there's a level of comfort that the athlete has come over, right? Whether it's the family, like, hey, we're home, we have a place to go. So there's naturally a loss of hunger for most athletes that you see after they're committed. Very few are still trying to grind to get something else or just do anything else. And most of them are focused on actually staying healthy to like get there, right? So what they don't realize is after we get a commit internally as a recruiting coordinator, I'm actually tracking. No longer am I watching highlights. Now I'm watching the full game of that player every single week. Like, all right, what are they doing? Now we got to see like what player did we actually get into our program? And now that we have monetary value that we have to assess to the player, now I got to see like, okay, how early can this player play based on his playing habits, how hard he plays, how kind of offense they run, kind of defense they run, and track that development throughout his senior season to see like, all right, well, what's the talent acquisition fee going to be for when he comes onto our roster? Or if he starts, curtailing down on the graph and there's some guy that's, right on that fringe, has a blowout senior season, have to make difficult decisions in November. And I've had clients that have been dropped at the end of November because the school got a new coaching staff. And they came in and was like, we don't want any more of our recruits to come here. And based on this film, it's not dynamic enough. And sorry, you got to figure it out. And now we have a month to essentially open up old relationships and figure out a home, you know what I mean? With no leverage. And so that's what I don't want athletes to find themselves in, because that's a pretty hard left turn.
Yeah, but sometimes that's out of their control though, huh?
That's the sucky part, unless you like continue to dominate your senior year. So now if I'm a new coach and I'm coming into University of Nevada and I'm looking at my commitment list and I'm looking at this guy, oh, he's all-state, California, this, that, and the third, like I'm not going to drop him. But again, you have to make it as undeniable for the new coaching staff as it is the previous one. And recruiting is a lot to do with relationships and that emotional piece of your development and all those type of evaluation metrics, which is going to get a little different because now there's, again, monetary value assessed to these players.
Yeah. And also in the post, there was mention of like the math behind roster building, right? And this dynamic now of like how coaches are building their roster is not all about recruiting like it was at one point in time. It's about recruiting and also the transfer portal. And when I look at it, I'm like, man, it would seem 2 times as hard now for an athlete to get a scholarship offer, just because of the simple fact that if I'm a coach and I'm sitting there and I'm like, do I want this 17, 18-year-old kid to kind of come and help improve my team, put our team in a better position? Or do I want like this 3rd, 4th year college type of player who's been in a college program, who's developed, who's played here, et cetera, and in this win now type of environment? I gotta make some decisions, right? And so like, not only is it about recruiting, but it's also about like, hey, we could get somebody like a seasoned or a savvy vet to come in and help us right now. So talk a little bit about like that, the dynamic that coaches, or the matrix that coaches think about as it relates to building their roster and not even balancing that dynamic, but how they think about like whether to, or how they weigh out recruiting versus like the NIL portal?
That's a great question. And to dive into it, it's more of a philosophical approach from the organization or that head coach, right? I would say Deion Sanders has more of a Dan Snyder type of approach, quick microwave. I got to go to the transfer portal. I'm taking elite guys out of high school, and that's how I'm going to build my roster. Then you have how Jim Harbaugh with Michigan kind of built it from the developmental standpoint. We'll reward guys from a retaining standpoint. The Michigan men will build that up in our own natural vibe. Penn State kind of goes from that development standpoint, development philosophical approach, like more so the Steelers, right? Believe in developing through the draft. So they stack up the recruiting classes very, very intentionally. Let's put it that way, whether it's like the top 5 stars or you get like an Abdul Carter that goes, number 3 overall in the draft, but he was like a 3 or 4 star coming out of high school. So they still take these guys and develop them, and they sold their kitchen on that philosophy. That's hence why they don't do the transfer portal. So I'm saying it's more of a philosophical approach across the board, and it's based on the time frame that the coach has, right? So guys that have bigger buyouts and longer deals, they have a little bit more patience in building out and spending some money on the high school recruits in that avenue versus someone like my man B. Marion, who goes out to Sac State, and you have to have a little bit of a microwave effect and build a culture at the same time. That takes a lot more creativity, finding the right culture pieces, paying the right guys, quick turnover, and really injecting your culture in an ether type of way with a flaming blowtorch type of situation to really engulf it immediately, to see that quick turnaround, right? From like, you see these programs that go from 4 wins to 10 wins. Syracuse is a great example last year, right? Mm-hmm. How they flipped the squad around, got the Ohio State quarterback, bring them in, do their thing from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. So it's a philosophical approach at the end of the day. And so for players, understanding where they fit within a philosophical approach of a coach is probably the first area in which you want to align with, right? If I'm a developmental player, there's no point in going to go play for a coach that always goes to the transfer portal. Because my time might be limited.
I just wanted to gut check my statement because I said earlier, it feels like it's harder to get a scholarship coming out of high school. Is that true? Is there some truth to that? Or
it's harder to get a committable offer. There's way more kids that will say I have a Michigan offer than that are actually able to say like I signed to Michigan. Like the caliber of kid that signed to Michigan is the same, but there's probably 150 plus kids that can say, well, Michigan offered me.
Got an offer.
But I just chose to go to Miami of Ohio. But no, they just stopped calling you because like you didn't grow or this didn't happen. You know what I mean? Like
they're hedging their bets a little bit and saying that like, look, I'm gonna make you a non-committable offer and we'll see how things go.
100%. And then you see like if they grow, and a lot of times that happens because of the relationships at the grassroots level. We talk about 7-on-7 coaches, high school coaches, where it's like the assistant coaches are independent contractors. So they're like, hey man, offer this guy, get us in good graces here. I'll deliver him to camp. I'll do whatever we need to do as he's growing up. And so you're essentially stroking the backs of like all the high school and the grassroots people who say like, hey, I got connections at Arkansas. I got connections at Penn State. I got connections at Michigan. And then next thing you know, the players at Lackawanna. And that, I could bring up, there's a player that got an offer from Oregon. I said, shout out to my man Jomo, but I knew Jomo was messing around with Penn State and offering from the West Coast. And then the kid ended up going JUCO because it was just like, hey, let's see if it works. And that makes it tougher because now the players have a false sense of security of what they really are. Like, hey, I really have an Oregon offer. And I got to be the one to be like, that's not real though.
And it only becomes real once you hit signing day.
Not committing, but like actually signing on the piece of paper and faxing it in.
So there's 3 steps, right? You could have a non-committable offer. Then you could have a committable offer that you can commit to. But that committable offer is only real and in effect until signing day.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, because the committable offer is only committable until you commit. Because like if you don't commit to the committable offer and they pick up their players or they get their numbers, like you're high and dry. You don't got nowhere to go unless you're just that guy. Like for example, Michael Parsons, he waited to the last minute and everybody's waiting. Us, Ohio State, Oklahoma, but like that's Michael Parsons. Like you better hedge your bets properly.
Right. And even when you are committed, because this shows up in the blog post, like it doesn't mean that you're untouchable. and some of the things around like kid losing spots, they get slower, lose their edge, right? Gain weight, all these things kind of show up of like, yo, you're either slacking off a little bit, you're not handling your business, or like some other things outside of your control can show up. But this nature of like committed doesn't mean untouchable. What's the thought process that an athlete should kind of operate with that, or the mindset that an athlete should operate, knowing that just because I'm committed does not mean that like things can't change here?
In this day and age, that's a great point, because in this day and age, the commitment should almost be the start gun at a race, to the point of like, this is now where we're going to start talking money evaluation. Like, that's where I want athletes to start thinking, because now we're trying to evaluate like, okay, what is this talent acquisition fee going to be for this player to get here from the time that he commits in June, from his senior season into January? Like, what exactly is going to happen? So for a lot of my athletes, when they, even when they do commit, my whole goal is like, yo, you need to drive your value and have other bigger schools wanting to come in for your services because you played that well, and make the school that you're committed to come to that standpoint. Not just by me calling and like, oh, fake offers, but like doing certain things that the evaluation process calls for. Hey, a corner makes this when they do that. Running backs make this when they do that. A quarterback of this caliber will do this. And we try to hit those points. So when it comes up, we're playing the same game that they're playing behind the scenes, to devalue us, to make sure that we're as valuable as possible. So as an athlete, when you commit, you need to be thinking like, oh, it's business time. Not necessarily like committing and it's over, I made it. Mama, we made it. Yeah. Like, no, we didn't.
Yeah. Is there ever a point where you do say you made it?
Yeah, we get that first check.
Or is there ever a point where it's like, are not necessarily the pressure's off, but like you officially stepped into a next level with a different set of considerations? Like you moved out of this phase.
After you sign. After you sign and you agree to your dollar amount. And I would say 3 weeks before you go into school, if you're a mid-year enrollee. That's kind of what I'm saying. And a lot of times it's signaled that the commitment is ending, right? We do a commitment party. Everybody's celebrating. This kid's committed to go to the school. And like behind the scenes, the evaluation is just like you said, it's just getting a little stricter.
This is a milestone type of thing. And it's a big deal to have numerous scholarship offers, to, be entertaining these opportunities, to make an official commitment and ultimately sign on the dotted line. I'm a big believer in like, at some point we need to celebrate or acknowledge like this is positive, and like have some affirming moments around, either with family, friends, advisors, around like, look, we put in a lot of work to get to this point. You know what I'm saying? Let's acknowledge that. Let's celebrate that. Let's rally around that, and not get too far ahead of ourselves, but like, look, this is an opportunity for us to reflect, to be positive, to be thankful about everything that we've accomplished, and then get back to work to put our heads down.
That's it. Because behind the football ops department or any sports department, like they don't want you to know what the evaluation is. It's like giving somebody a test. We're trying to see like, yo, are they worthy of this? I don't want to give you the answers to the test to make sure you got leverage on me. And so a lot of times they're not going to convey, hey, you need to pick this up. I remember I was at a camp about a month ago, and there was a committed player standing close to us, and I was next to a coach from that Power 4 university in that program, and the kid had said something about his age. Like he didn't want to, it was something about his age, and he kind of conceded to being younger. Like, as that was a reason to not compete or something of that nature. And then the whole coaching staff was like, oh, that's a big red flag. We got to revisit that immediately. And this is just in passing, the kid just saying something, not thinking about it because he's super comfortable as a commit. And he said something that was like really a discussion later on in the day of like, how is this kid wired? Because there's a external validation or external accomplishments. How a player tracks after that is a critical factor that players are not aware of, right? So we'll like put it in the orange basis. Okay, he gets this offer. I know this kid from 8th grade, he gets an offer. Now let's track him intently. Okay, player of the year, track him. Does this, track him. And then you can start to see like, all right, are they going to change based on external rewards? Because we got to remember, we're trying to still figure out how this player or asset is going to respond to different resources, money, and things that's going to be injected in their life. Yeah. But you're judging teenagers.
Yeah. And those are things that won't always come onto an athlete's radar, i.e. the coach is not going to tell you directly. sometimes they'll just move on, right?
They're
If there's
looking to
enough
eliminate you.
yeah. They're trying to find reasons not to bring you on or to not pay you the dollar amount that you're looking for.
And we need to understand that because they present themselves as like, hey, I'm here, I'm on, you know what I mean? I'm trying to help you get to the next level. I'm replacement daddy type stuff. And it's just like, yo, be careful with that. Like, because there's a level of trust that you got to have with a coach. And then I believe on building a relationship through the business. Like, hey, you understand the value I provide, I understand the value you provide. And then we grow into a friendship as a coach player relationship versus a lot of times in the recruiting process, everyone's talking about building relationships and it becomes really fake and it just sets up a lot of people to get their hearts hurt because the coaches have the leverage.
Yeah. Let's, kind of flip it on its head a little bit and talk about, because you mentioned some of the red flags that coaches are evaluating for, but what are some of the red flags that players should be evaluating for after they commit, right? But they're not still signed.
Oh, no, that's great. Especially in this day and age, you got to look at that NIL support. And when I say NIL support, not necessarily just the money that they're giving you, pushing across the table. Like, how are they helping you actually cultivate your brand? How are they actually helping you cultivate your value and what you want to do in life? Have they shown that from previous players that have been on the team? Do they promote that with players that they bring back? Do they only bring back professional athletes? Do they bring back CEOs and guys that have done other things and like really try to paint that story when we go back to, like we mentioned earlier, that cutthroat criteria, so we know that they're telling the truth the whole way through and not basically the story that they're trying to tell us, and make sure that it aligns to you. I think that's the critical thing that you need to do to make sure that those red flags don't pop up, right? Because I think some of the red flags are like when coaches speak bad about other programs, that shows a little lack of confidence in how they do things. And then be honest about what you need to produce. I mean, football coaches come in many different shapes and sizes. All coaches do. And again, this is where I feel like high school players need to be selfish in understanding what they need to develop. You're not going to change any of these guys, but so much. Did that answer your question? I know it was a little.
Yeah. No, I think it did in a few ways, because we've talked about like how the things that we know are quantifiable from, and really highlighting the evaluation points, whether that's speed, attitude, weight, metric-based stuff. But there's also like, again, I just always want to highlight how can we give players a game in a perspective that they can think about and evaluate things from their own lens. Just because it's a two-way street to know how I'm being evaluated and then also know how I should evaluate as well. You know what I'm saying? And just like, again, the coaches are evaluating the players need to be evaluating coaches, programs, etc. And so along those lines, like, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen from players and their families after they've committed?
Not going to camp. I think it's interesting when you see like some of the camp, like after you're committed, still going to camp with that coach and like go through drills and coaching with them. That's something that I think Penn State does, that, I mean, not to give any secrets, but we always have our commitments come up in camp with our coaches multiple times in the summer. So they know what it's like to really be coached by your future coach. And so they end up working with them and understanding what they need to do and taking it back. And you can really understand what that coach's expectations are, get a jump start. But I always believe in getting into that operational mode as a player once you're committed. So like once you're in commitment, before you commit phase one, it's that decision-making process. But after that, it's operational mode. And to get in operational mode, you're getting prepared to play at that next level. And that means earning that work and trust with your coach. You do that by continue to stay engaged. When I say camp, it's because I think a lot of people view camp as strictly an evaluation tool for the school to you, when really it's an evaluation tool for you to the school. How the hell am I going to know if this dude can develop me if he can't coach me like in this next 2 hours?
I've never worked with him. All I've done is talk to him. But camp is an opportunity for me to actually work with him.
Come on, like, what if I'm soft and he yells at me after I get beat and I whimper and I don't want to go anymore? Like, that's not, you don't want to do that when you get to college. So like those environments that you put yourself in camp, that's how I really learned what coaches I felt comfortable around. Like for me, and I know that for us committed players, the ones that do that and constantly are trying to build that gap of operation to the staff are the ones that have the most success.
Yeah.
And so and that becomes, I guess, customized depending on where your gaps are, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it shows, I mean, that's a great point, right? Around like having an opportunity to actually work with a coach, because coaches are a lot different in their tone, their demeanor, and their attitude. When they're in your house recruiting you or showing up at your school in your athletic director's office, it's a lot different tenor and, engagement when you get out on the field, right? And you get to kind of see the real coach or the other side of the human being. And I know that for a fact, because a lot of my coaches, man, I mean, they're great human beings, right? But when you get out on that field and that playing surface, man, like they get into mode, you know what I mean? And they could like MFU, SOBU, I mean, all sorts of things that if you're not prepared for, if that's not how you receive information or kind of like work, that's not your working style, it's going to be a bad relationship. It's going to be a really bad relationship.
Because you talk about the mental stress that a player is under, right? Because you're introduced to this coach, he's coming in, what's up, homeboy? What's going on? Da, da, da. You all gravy. And then he gets out there, he's like, oh, backpedal, do this. And then it's like, they're not even judging if you're doing it right. They're judging how quick you can correct the mistakes. That's where the stress comes in, right? It's like, all right, you get something wrong. How fast can you correct it? I mean, even when my pops at Penn State, I mean, we used to have the first 15 minutes was like eliminator drills. Let's get all these drills out the way. Just eliminate all the prospects. Let's just eliminate. Let's get down to it. Who cannot do what we need them to do? I mean, it doesn't really matter what the coach does at that point. It's just like, oh, you can't play here anyway.
That's
a lot of players need to know that going in.
Out the coach, because you don't know those drills, you don't know his coaching style, so like your head is spinning trying to figure it out, and how you respond in that moment, man, that makes a huge difference. Or it's a telling type of characteristic trait.
Because we're trying to map out our avenue of development to the best way that we can. We can't stack it 100% in our favor. So even from the first part of the process, even when we get offers, like, yeah, you want to get offers, but that's why I say offers don't really matter. That's my saying, and people kind of push back because like, hey, you can't go to school if you don't have an offer. I'm like, you can, but the offers come, and then it's just like, yo, you want to make sure that you're a take and that the whole staff wants you there and wants to see you succeed. I think the biggest misconception is when a class of 25 reports to campus, most of the time in the summer, coaches are gone in this current time frame on vacation, and they're just left with the weight room staff for like the next 6 weeks. And when everyone comes back at the end of July, they give us predictions of who's going to make it. And typically it's about 50% that aren't going to make it. And we know that 6 weeks in. So in that 6 weeks in, either we got a choice to be like, all right, these half that aren't going to make it, can they make it based on these characteristic traits? Or we talk about churning the roster. Do we have to out recruit them, or like, what do we need to do with them? But like a lot of times you don't realize that until they get there. And then, the players are like happy. They're getting dropped off. Hey, mom, I got my stuff here. Next thing you know, we up here talking about, man, we got to get this dude up out of here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I guess jumping off of that, like how can athletes like quantifiably, objectively prove that they are improving post-commitment, right? Where like, I'm taking care of business. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, right? And basically eliminating all doubt from like the staff. What are some steps? What are some like tactics? What are some ways that athletes can position themselves undeniably like, look, I'm the guy that I said I was, and I'm ready to come to campus and, start taking over?
Understand the gaps that you had prior to committing and close those gaps intently. And after you do that, I mean, always focus on closing the gap of operational readiness, right? And I mean, operational readiness, but when you get into the locker room, school, you're ready to run full throttle, understanding the defense, the offense, understanding the coaches, the expectations, and earning that working trust by communicating, right? You're a big boy now, 17, 18, committing, like, hey, get the weight room program, do these different type of things. And that senior year, if you commit in the summer before that senior year, you should have some angst when you play, because you are like as a power forward commit, you should be looking to dominate. So as you're dominating, like the staff wants to be like, they want to show you off too. Like, hey, look at our recruit. Like, they don't want to show off the recruit that's a average dude that's getting beat by someone that's going to Duquesne. No disrespect to anybody, but they don't want to see that. And then if they do, then we're going to start having different questions about, hey, who's the person that we got to let this guy down to? So playing on the field, make sure your film is intact, making sure that you're having communication and earning working trust with the weight room staff, like that, the school that you're going to, whether it's understanding what your weight that you're expected to play at, the weight room program and things of that nature. And then making sure that you pick up, I guess the cadence of the game, right? So like that working trust, closing that operational gap and dominating on the field. Then I think this is where LIG sports groups come in, is we're having that unbiased, objective evaluations to be able to close those gaps that they're not going to tell you about all the time.
Step by step, take it one day at a time. It sounds like it's an exciting opportunity for young athletes, but a lot of considerations. And the ultimate, I think, takeaway for our listeners is like, never stop learning, never stop growing. Arm yourself with information, resources, celebrate the wins for sure, but understand that, like, look, tomorrow's another day and you're going to have to keep putting one foot in front of the next. You want to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. And there's vast resources and a lot of things out there that can support that journey. And even the point that you made around like connecting with the weight room staff, et cetera. Like, I always look back at college as a place of a lot of resources. You know, a lot of times we go in with like this one track mind and a singular focus around like what we need to do or why we're here, but maintain that aspect of it, but also think about the other resources that the university has to help leverage and position you and move forward that singular focus that you have, right? Like, it is imperative, I think, to just really kind of be mindful of that. And whether that's like, again, the weight room staff, it could be the trainers, like just how are you tuning yourself, arming yourself with information, making relationships and the connections to kind of piece it all together so that you can be the best you possible day in and day out, you know?
You mentioned something that's really critical. And I think even for me, this is probably my being prepared on every front. My biggest hurdle, I think, even transitioning to college, like I had a lot of friction with the weight room staff. Like kind of, because that's where I like to tell athletes, like, yo, they have a lot of say in what's going on. So even that first meeting where coaches come back, they're the ones that are giving the reports. So making sure that you're physically and mentally ready to close that operational gap, because that is the first step, right? Because they then go back to the head coach, and then that head coach has that expectation. Then they comes back to that person that recruited you, right? And then they have that frame of who you are. So making sure that you're physically ready to step on the field and that you never stop developing, ask questions,
right.
Like continue to seek that information from the coaches that you're going to be playing for, because that signals that this person cares about us being successful and me keeping my job. We got to understand that this is a working relationship at this point.
Mm-hmm. It's a business for sure. You got any other additional closing thoughts before we wrap up, man?
Nah, man, offers don't really matter. Take lists do. Make sure that you guys are navigating this evaluation process. Even after the commitment is when you really want to drive up your value and take them to the bank. Make sure that you're going to the negotiation table with leverage. And we help you do that at LIG Sports Group, and making sure that you guys have the keys here at Blue Chip Academy. Until next time, I'm Ryan Mundy, Justin King. Thank y'all for listening, man. Check us out, Blue Chip Academy, on all streaming platforms. Listen, download, and then also head over to Substack and check out the latest blog post that we just kind of chatted about in this podcast. And then go to social and follow us. We're on Instagram, Blue Chip Academy. Check us out. We're growing and we're here to help, man. Real game from real pros. And so until next time, peace.